Hello, everyone. We'll begin in just a minute with an introduction from our administrator, Meet Bose. All right, Amit, you should be able to address the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone who are on the East Coast and everybody else joining around the country. FRA is pleased to host this webinar for you all. We've been working hard on implementing the Justice40 initiative that the Department of Transportation, that the administration has underway. And at FRA, we embedded the Justice40 principles in our notices of funding opportunity. And we also paid attention to those efforts in our grant selection process as well. And we appreciate those applications that have come in that address the Justice40 initiatives that we have across the Department of Transportation and here at the Federal Railroad Administration. Of course, FRA is absolutely committed to ensuring that our communities are safe and are environmentally sound. And what we also have done through the Justice40 efforts that you will see today is develop tools and resources for you all across the country. And I want to especially thank Emily and others at FRA who are busy implementing the Justice40 initiative and who are thinking creatively and thinking about different ways for FRA to implement the initiative across the board. Some of you have seen me visit areas like the East End of Houston, Birmingham, Alabama, places that have for decades have had needs that have been unaddressed. And I made sure that FRA focused on those communities, which also include places like Hammond, Indiana. We want to make sure to address those situations that have been longstanding, as well as that have risen recently. And we don't want to overlook places around the country. So I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you for your support of these initiatives. And also at the FRA, we have a number of programs that the bipartisan infrastructure law enabled us to move forward on. And we are and also look for more award announcements in the coming weeks here. Thank you. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you, Administrator Bose, and we appreciate your welcome. All right, so just for the record, for everyone on the call, the webinar is going to be recorded and the publication of the webinar will be made available on FRA's website. So if you miss anything or you need to hear something again, don't worry, it will be available to you in the future. So let's start with what it is we're going to cover today. So we'll start with a brief overview of the Justice40 initiative and how the DOT has implemented that initiative. I would like to, full disclosure for the whole group, let you all know I'm not a superior expert. So we have invited some of our DOT compatriots to the call to answer questions if you have any on the Justice40 initiative itself. We will then go into the Justice40 Rail Explorer, which is the primary focus of the webinar. And it's a tool that the FRA has created to support communities and to support project sponsors and applicants in understanding how rail infrastructure intersects with the Justice40 initiative. And then we will do a demonstration of the tool. Raquel Wright will be leading that. She is the primary developer of the tool and show you the features and functions that are available to you. It is publicly published online already on FRA's website. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. All right, so Justice40 initiative. Justice40 is an opportunity that the Biden administration has taken to address gaps in transportation infrastructure and public services by targeting that at least 40% of federal investments that are in covered programs flow to disadvantaged communities to essentially mitigate and sort of address some of the burdens and issues with access in those communities. So specifically, Justice40 is going to increase affordable transportation options that connect Americans to jobs, fight climate change. It is part of a resiliency initiative from the White House, and improve access to resources and quality of life. It identifies and prioritizes projects that benefit rural, suburban, tribal, and urban communities, specifically that are facing barriers to affordable, equitable, reliable, and safe transportation. And finally, because transportation projects are not always purely beneficial, and we know this, it also looks at the flip side of the coin, which is looking at the negative impacts of transportation projects and systems on disadvantaged communities and seeking to understand if meaningful engagement is occurring within those communities. As I said before, there is a lot of information online about the Justice40 initiative. We've provided some links here in the slides so that if you want a more in-depth information about the program, you can go and find it online. So at DOT, this has been implemented sort of with three major focus areas. One is that the needs of the community have been identified through meaningful public engagement, looking at also understanding how a community is impacted by a lack of transportation options and investments, either historically or currently, and then what benefits that a project could create in those communities and how those benefits could alleviate disadvantage that the community is experiencing. So it's pretty targeted in looking at what components of disadvantage community is experiencing and how a project could target those. So what does a component of disadvantage mean? So the DOT has already published on US DOT's website, the Equitable Transportation Community Explorer. That tool is a complementary tool to the one that we are going to talk about today. We did not reinvent any wheels here. What we did was we leveraged the ETCE methodology and data and just brought it more into the rail environment. And so they're really using the same information, the same methodology, the same data. Just one gives a slightly different view, a more detailed view, I would say, of rail infrastructure. There is also the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, the CEJST. That is another tool for looking at disadvantaged communities. Again, it is complementary to the ETCE and also to the Justice40 Rail Explorer. So there's not exactly a one-stop shop here. There are different ways of looking at these issues. There are very complex issues. The way that the DOT has implemented this sort of understanding of disadvantage in a transportation context is looking at 5 components. The first is transportation insecurity. The next is environmental burden, then social vulnerability, health vulnerability, and climate and disaster risk burden. So those are sort of the 5 components of transportation disadvantage that are considered in the ETCE tool, but also in the Justice40 Rail Explorer. So I'm going to show you the ETCE. It's technically ETC Explorer, but I call it ETCE. There is links to this tool embedded within the tool we're going to show you today. So if you want to go and look at this, it gives a more in-depth and more detailed and granular understanding of disadvantage than what the Justice40 Rail Explorer does, because again, we do not want to reinvent wheels or duplicate effort here. So this is really the place to go if you are interested in understanding the components of disadvantage and the underlying measures that are contributing. This methodology includes over 40 different indicators on the 5 different components of disadvantage. Those indicators are normalized, summed to the component where they are relevant, and then each of the 5 components is then combined to create an overall index score of transportation disadvantaged communities. And this is done at the census tract level. So if you go to the ETCE and you're interested in a census tract, you can actually click through and see on the dashboard here, the 5 components of disadvantage, and the underlying metrics is in the bottom corner there. And as you click through the different tabs, you can see the different measures and where they're falling in the percentile ranks. This is the version of the tool that is the national results. And this is the version that we are using within the Rail Explorer tool. So they're tied together very closely using the same methodology. If you are interested in this level of information, you should definitely be looking at the ETCE on USDOT's website. So now our tool, the FRA's Justice40 Rail Explorer. The real issue here is that we have 3 covered programs at the FRA covered by the Justice40 initiative. CRISI, the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program, the Federal State Partnership for Intercity Passenger Rail Program, and the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. So those 3 programs are covered under Justice40, which means that we are looking to again ensure that we are meeting that target goal of investing in communities where these projects would be of a benefit to those disadvantaged communities. And they align very closely with sort of all of the covered program areas under the DOT's auspices. So, big reveal. Here's a screenshot of the tool. So what this does is it overlays the data from the ETC Explorer, showing disadvantaged communities. And again, we're looking at those that are on the national results by census tract. Those are the aqua sort of toned census tracts you see in the screenshot, with including the 5 components of disadvantage. So we've given you sort of the first 2 layers, the whether or not a census tract is considered transportation disadvantaged, and then what the 5 component underlying scores are for that. And by the way, being above the 65th percentile in total for the 5 components puts you in sort of that disadvantaged community indicator group. And then each of the individual indicators, if you're over 65%, you're considered disadvantaged sort of on that component. So that's what you can dig into looking at this layer. Then also for purposes of understanding localized emissions, we have included particulate matter PM 2.5 emissions levels and diesel particulate matter emissions levels. And that's specifically included because of the impact that rail yards can have in contributing to but also mitigating localized air pollution issues, which is something that our grant programs do consider. And then the NARN, which is the North American Rail Network. That is the route level network of rail in the United States. It comes from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, BTS. Within the NARN, we've also included all of the rail yards. You'll see those in red. Again, because some of the projects you all would be considering or issues in your community would be centered around the operations of a yard, not necessarily just the main line. We will very soon be adding in passenger stations as well. So that would be a feature that you can turn on and off and look for a passenger station. The grade crossing inventory system is in here. This is every grade crossing that falls within the United States, both active and passive crossings, but all the open ones, so it would not show you a closed crossing. 2020 census data is in here so that you can look in more depth on demographics, but also urban and rural definitions of communities. The 118th congressional districts, in case that is of use to you. We know that in grant applications, we do ask for information like this. So we are trying now to provide you some easier way to find it in one place. And then the Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Lands. And this is where we cross over very heavily with the CEJST because they also indicate tribal lands as part of that tool. So those are the layers that are available. What this means is in the tool, you can search for specific census tracts that are above certain emissions levels. You can search for rail yards by the owner of the yard or the name of the yard. You can search for crossing numbers if you know the USDOT crossing number of interest, or you can investigate the state or county that the crossings are in. You can also use the search bar to put in any address or common place name. So if you want to know where you specifically are in the context of all of this information, all of this data, you can put in your address and find yourself. And again, as I said earlier, passenger station names will be added in the next release. So to avoid duplication of effort, it's a theme here. We did not sort of recreate the depth of information on the methodology of the ETC Explorer. We instead reference you to that information. The Justice40 Rail Explorer tool does include a user guide, but its focus is on how to use the tool and the sources of the data that we are aggregating here. But for more on the methodology, you would have to go to the ETCE. And so this user guide is embedded in the tool itself. It's also on our website. And what Raquel will show you with the demo, you can essentially mimic these steps, these features by going through the user guide and following the user guide. All right, and with that, I will hand over the baton to Raquel for doing the demonstration of the tool itself. Are you ready, Raquel?
Yes, thank you, Emily.
All right.
I would like to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Does anyone tell me yes?
You're good.
All right, perfect. So this is when you first go to the Rail Explorer map, the Justice40 Rail Explorer map. This is the first thing you'll see. The first thing you'll see is the map of the United States and the layer list. This will pop on automatically. I'm just going to close it real quick and show you where you can turn it on. So this is where the layers are turned on and off, where you can click them, toggle on and off. You will see some of them are grayed out. And this is the reason why this is because at a national view, the rail lines and grade crossings would just take up too much of the map and make it very, very busy. So you can scroll in and out to the map by zooming in using these buttons, or if you have a mouse, you can go ahead and zoom in. And as I zoom in, you'll see that these layers are going to show. So at the zoom level, these will be able to turn on and off. Also, there is a little arrow at the bottom. It will show you all the attributes of the data. Again, it's only going to show you the attribution of what's in the view of the map. So that's the same thing. So if I go back to my little home, you'll see they'll be grayed out again. And as you go down the list, just showing that by default, we do have the yards turned on and the census tract with the disadvantaged areas. But you can also turn on all these other layers of the census data, the particular matter and diesel, the congressional districts, all this information that Emily just previously went over. These can all be toggled on and off. So I'll just put on particular matter, and then it takes a while to draw. You can see that there. So what I'm going to do is turn off the layer list, and I'm just going to show you the legend. So this legend, again, whatever's turned on the map is going to show in the legend. So I'm going to zoom in again. And as you can see, whatever is turned on is going to show in the legend. So if I go back to home, you're only going to see what's going to be displayed on the map. The tool next, the button next to the legend is our info button. This button will show you the version and when we last released or updated the tool. It will also give you information about the Justice40 and links to the data that Emily just shared in the presentation. It will also give you a link to our user guide. So I'm just going to right click on this and open in a new tab. And you can see this user guide is going to go through and show you how to use the map and all the information that's within the map. So I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to go to the buttons that are on the left side of the map. On this, the top one, this is your base maps. And base maps is available. You can see different types of underlining data. So I'm just going to zoom into kind of LA area and I'm going to turn on imagery. And so that will turn on all the imagery. And we have all these different base maps that are available to us. So you can see all the information, the underlining imagery underneath. I'm going to go back to my light gray canvas and go back to home. The other button, so you can see the arrows down here. You can toggle this on and off. And the next one is add data. And this one is very useful. You can add your own URLs if you have a web mapping service or your own file. You can also search. I prefer to search on ArcGIS Online because that gives you the ability to search anything that anyone's ever posted on ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to do floods. Let's say you want to see if there's a certain area for your grant and if it's in a flood zone. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my map. It's going to take a moment to draw. And then you can see that area is coming in. Now, if I go to my layer list, you can see it now in the layer list. Now, this won't be saved in your, if you close out of this, it's not going to save in your current session. So if I refresh this map, you'll see in the layer list, it's not there. So once you add data and you go back to the map, you want to re-add the data, you'll have to re-add it again. Okay, so next button down here is our filter buttons. And these filter buttons, we have one for the equity, one for the yards, and one for the grade crossing. So I'm just going to go over and just show, if we wanted to put in, let's look at the 85 percentile for particular matter. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. I'm going to go ahead and zoom down into, that is showing all of the census tracts that has a particular matter of 85 and over. But if I want to do diesel, I'll do that as well. And we'll see what is equal to both of those queries. And you can see in here that these are the areas that have particular matter in diesel over 85. So I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to turn that off. My next query over here, our filter, is going to be based on our rail yards. The rail yards names can change from time to time, and these are the rail yards that were derived from the North American Rail Network. So if you had a certain rail yard in particular, let's say we're going to look at maybe Ann Arbor. We'll go ahead and click on Ann Arbor, and that yard name underneath is only going to pick the yard names that are associated to that railroad. So I'm going to go ahead and select that yard, and I'll click this slide button, and it will zoom me to that location. So now I can get to that location. But let's say that you can't really find the yard name that you were interested in just because of maybe the naming convention. There is this find address or place at the top. So let's say you wanted to look at, let's say, Union Station, Washington, D.C. Oh, and then automatically pops up. You can click on that and it will zoom you to the location. And here you can see the yards that are in DC associated to the Amtrak station. And the last filter that we have is our grade crossing filter. Turn that off. If you had a particular, just to keep in mind, these grade crossings, like we said before, it's coming from the grade crossing inventory. And these locations sometimes not always have the best location for the grade crossing because the inventory by the mandate is based on information coming from the state DOT or the railroads. FRA does not have the ability to change or the data that's in the inventory. So I just wanted to make sure to keep in mind that these locations are coming from the railroads or the state DOTs. Now, if you had a certain, let's say, grade crossing in mind, and I have one that I would like to show. And now go ahead and put that in. I'll search. And I'll select that. And I'll go to my slide to say zoom to location. There's that grade crossing. But what I want to do is I want to look at maybe the census tract level. And we're going to go ahead and put on the census tract. And here, we've got to see what we're looking at. So I'll put on my legend. And here it shows that this grade crossing is actually in a rural area, but very close to an urban population. But you can tell that what this location, this grade crossing, is technically in a rural area. Now I'm going to go ahead and click off my census tracts. Now, say if you wasn't sure about the grade crossing, you wanted to look by state, you can also select grade crossing by state and by county. So I'm going to empty out that field. If I pull in, let's say, California. The counties that are going to populate it are only the counties within California. Lastly, the one thing I do want to show is I'm going to go ahead and go back in and zero in into this area. I'm going to turn on several of these layers. Let's say particular matter and maybe the census tracts. And I'm going to click on one of these grade crossings. I'm going to show you how you can get the underlining information with everything you clicked on. So here you see 1 of 14. It's going to show you everything. This is called our pop-up window. It'll show you all the information you clicked on. So these are the grade crossings. This will show you some of the data that's coming out of the tool, of the ETC tool. And that's how you can get to the underlying data, or you can go to your attributes underneath. I'm going to go back to home. And again, if you ever have any worries or questions on how to use this, you can always go back to the info guide and go to the user guide to see how you can get back to use the different filters and functionality of the map.